You just came right away as soon as I was going to go down to here.
Yeah, I had to help get a lid off in the kitchen.
But you came here as soon as I came here to go down here.
It disappeared?
Yeah.
That's not good. The Guru's got
No,
to be
you
accessible.
came. You came.
Oh, I see. And that's good timing.
Yeah. That's the way things comes.
I heard that it might be arranged that you could come to the retreat.
Yeah, this morning, and he said, what about my food, because he has surgery in his
Oh,
tent. And I said, leave the food, on the table. But he wasn't feel comfortable, and he gets like panic-like feelings. And he's always actually like that. But he's getting more that way since he got sick. And always I live my life like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he lets me come here.
Yeah. Well, you could just leave him lunch because you'd only be gone for one meal. The lunch meal you'd be...
He doesn't, I can leave, yeah, it's a breakfast, but that's what he said. So I feel like we should take it easy, maybe next year or next day, who knows, would be better, because then enough time for him to prepare inside.
Yeah.
But if he says no, then I would be like too much conflict. That's why I came here all the time.
Yeah, right.
But this is like, I like to be this kind of place. I'm not interested anything else in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not selfish, whatever I have, I'm ready no matter whoever.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment I would go and serve.
Well, maybe I'll let you come some other time.
Yeah, I think because it's so close, and I can come back home same day. Right now it's kind of, I have to kind of take care of this person still.
You want to read some?
Yeah.
Okay.
Monday, June 4th, 1883, with the devotees at Dakshinaswar. About 9 o'clock in the morning, the devotees began to arrive at the temple garden. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the porch of his room facing the Ganges. M, who had spent the previous night with the master, sat near him. Balaram and several other devotees were present. Rakal lay on the floor, resting his head on Master's lap. For the past few days, the Master had been regarding Rakal as the body of Krishna. Seeing Trailokya passing on his way to the Kali temple, Sri Ramakrishna asked Rakal to get up. Trailokya bowed to the Master. The Master turned to Trailokya. Was there no yatra performance last night? Trailokya, no.
Om Mantranam Jivabhuta Tulya Smrita Shakti Rupaya. Tatahina Vavrarohe Nishvalaha Sharada Pravat. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. She, whom the ancient seers of India realized and know as the imperishable Shakti, is the meaning in all the slokas and sutras of the scriptures. Without her, O fair one, all the tattvas would be about as useful as clouds with no rain. She is the perfect I consciousness, defining the meaning in all the words and all the alphabets. And the secret of all the mantras, whose very nature is the essence of non-duality. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Iresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatja Akanda Rupa Stite Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvesho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And now we return, as we do again and again, to the subject of the Dharma, that sure and certain proof of the fact that the revealed scriptures give us. Of what fact? That all this is Brahman, when people are moving about their everyday lives looking at it as everything else but that, because that Brahman is immovable and it's not an agent of action. It doesn't cause things to happen, so there's no cause and effect in it. It's not parted. It's not divisible. It's indivisible. And many other divine attributes of the non-dual type, which we were just talking about. Divine Mother's essence is the essence of non-duality. So Brahman and Shakti both have that ability to hide behind all of these projections of Maya, like action and imperfection, and there's the veiling power and distorting power that covers the truth but never modifies it in the very least. And so one has to go mining for it, as gold in rivers, or oil in sesame seeds, or patina in copper. If you put a penny on the shower and wait a while, you'll see some green come out of it. You never knew it was there. So beings would never know that that indivisible essence of consciousness was there, as my teacher used to say, and as Meister Eckhart often said, as the very ground of existence. That's Brahman or Atman in the case of the apparently individualized soul. We use that word apparently in Vedanta because the soul can never really be divided, but Maya makes it seem so. So if you have the sure and certain proof of the fact that all is Brahman in front of you, and you've corroborated it with the scriptures, our main chart for that was getting yourself on a path of transformation so you can get beyond transmigration, then getting yourself a guru, checking the scriptures with that guru, and then via that develop a little bit of distaste for the ever-changing Maya and its fluctuations, the shifting sands that you can't build your house on, at least not for very long. It's sort of like Madame Pele on the Big Island. She's always flowing. The lava comes, and so they wait for a while, for 10 or 20 years, and no lava flows in that area, and they build there. But sure enough, she flows in that direction again and covers roads and burns resort hotels and causes this constant change. And so this constant changing Maya gets a little tiring. They call that world weariness in the scriptures of India. World weariness will come upon the person soon enough. And you don't want to be clinging to change, or clinging to the body, or clinging to life. Abhinivesha, it's called in Sanskrit by the father of yoga. So that's the fifth and lowest hell that you can fall into, is fear of death, because you're a birthless, deathless being, and Maya is causing you to think that you're going to die and that you've been born. As we can even sing that for you if you like. In Shankara's Nirvana Shatkam, he sings about na mrityur na shanka, na me jati beda. So mrityur is death and birth. So he sings to that effect. Na mrityur na shanka, na me jati beda, pita naiva me naiva, Matama janma, na bandhur na mitram, guru naiva shishya, chidananda rupaha, shivoham shivoham. So Shankara, in his 6 verses on Nirvana, it's the 5th verse, sings Namrityur, I have no death because I was never born. Kind of puts the capper on that one, rather than just brooding about death, that whether it exists or not. He cuts to the chase and goes back to the origin of the thing, which would be birth, and say, because I was never born, the body was born in Maya and so forth, but the Atman remains the same, this unchanging reality, watching its own birth and watching its own life and watching its own passing. And then so coming and going is all mere nonsense, as Vivekananda said, from the standpoint of the soul who observes this. And that's going to be a matter of opening your singular eye, the Jnana Chakshu. Thine eye be single, you shall know that truth. And so that's the non-attachment that you're building in order to get to some sort of witness consciousness. Yesterday I was saying all life is a dream, and that might be too much of a simplistic way of saying it. People who are deeper into philosophy might say, well, that's just kind of a inadequate way of describing it. But if you put these principles of dharma behind it and say that you're talking about witness consciousness or the observer with a capital O, then you could see that it has much more of a validity as a mainstay of that philosophy that you're considering. So it's life's a dream, though true it seem. The only truth is he, the living. So the living is that eternal life that is Brahman and Atman, and which is observing the play of Maya as if it were a dream. And so beings who identify with the play, are with the dream, then they don't know themselves to be the dreamer. You may have, in your own deep sleep state or in your dream state one night, told yourself, well, this is just a dream, I'm going to wake up from it. And then you do. In that same way, you would be here in the waking state and say, well, this is also a kind of dream, I want to wake up from it. And if you did, then you would know what the seers feel like every moment of their day, every breath they take, from cradle to the grave, as my teacher used to say. You'd be in an ever-awake state. I sometimes call that yogic insomnia, is how our founder of our SRV, Lexicon, defined that. Yogic insomnia. So that ever-awake state is preferable, and in fact then there's no other default zone that you want from that, because that is peace and that is bliss and that's love and that's light. And so you would prefer that, but from the standpoint of before you practice some sort of transformation on the mind to turn it into a steady single eye instead of two eyes and five senses and so forth, you would have never have thought that maybe that was possible for you. And then you enter into spiritual life in any given lifetime, and you get a teacher, and the teacher points you to the Shruti, as we said yesterday when we were looking at these other charts. And you hear that truth, and it rings true to you, and you get on the path and you follow it, and game over. See, Maya quickly disappears from your mind. In the meantime, that dream was going on all the time, and you were holding it. So this waking up is a very important facet of anyone's life. And the seers are just gurus and dharma teachers who are just waiting, standing around waiting, watching people to see signs of that happening. There are certain signs that you'll see in people. And because what Sri Ramakrishna mentioned, one of them is just yearning. Another one is, like desperation, like feeling bound and not being able to get free. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, if you hold the female pigeon's beak, she'll just sit there, But if you hold the male pigeon's beak, he'll like fight to get away. See, so it's not a gender reference, but it's just the fact that some souls have this desperation when they feel bondage pressing in around them. They're desperate to get free, as if their very nature is freedom, and they don't like it to be limited or truncated, or they don't want to be bound at all. They want to breathe. Like Swami Vivekananda said, I want everyone to be free as the air they breathe. So his main directive as a teacher, although he probably wouldn't call himself that, because he says the teacher ruins everything by thinking he teaches. You should just remove obstacles for people, stand back and let them walk the path themselves. So That's called hands-off teaching. So otherwise the teacher will spoil it by, in many other ways, it's possible, to be too controlling or to do everything for the student. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other avenues there in the non-teacher or the inferior teacher that are not healthy for the spiritual life of a soul who is already free but doesn't know it yet. And that's the way you'd have to put it. You're already free, but you're just not aware of it yet. So awakening would be these, samkriti here is learning this from the sun god. If you've read your Akshi Upanishad and prepared for this class, those slokas, 10 through 15 yesterday we were reading, had a lot to do with learning the doctrines and the categories. So the categories would be, you might say the best list of categories would be Samkhya Yoga. If you familiarize yourself with the 24 cosmic principles, then you'll know how consciousness comes down in fives, as we were looking at yesterday. And that's why there's so many fives, fingers, hands, senses in you, because they really coordinate and connect with previous level of subtler fives, and fives here connect to fives in the dream state, like 5 pranas out here. There are 5 pranas that are subtle pranas too, like psychic prana is moving your dream body, but gross prana is moving your gross body out here, you see. And you just have to look at speaking, handling, locomotion, procreating, and excreting as the 5 gross senses, and then connect them to the next. That speaking goes with hearing, and handling goes with feeling, and so forth. And then you'll know that they're connected, and that should give you a key that consciousness came marching out from somewhere, trickled down, as we say, and it did limit itself. It took on limited coverings. But it can just easily, as the Upanishad said, you know what I'm referring to from yesterday? It can just as easily shed its slough like a snake. So it gets a new skin. I've seen that happen when I was a boy. I've watched that process several times. The snake wriggling out of its old skin and shining goes forth, you see. You're right here in Oregon. If it's a rattlesnake, you have to kind of back off. And you'll come back later and the whole skin will be there except the rattle. You see. Pick it up. Look at that. You stay away from those. So just like that, then you would shed the slightest attachment to external objects when they're intensified by pride, conceit, arrogance, intolerance, greed, and delusion. If they're not accompanied with that, then you're not in any risk. You can move amongst the sense objects like a yogi can without getting attached to them. And they come and go and you use them as you will, and there's no leftover attachment. That would be the path of the yoga marga. You see. This path I'm talking to you right now is the jnana marga. If you could understand this, you could get free in 6 months. But the West can't understand it, and most people today can't understand it. They won't give time to it, as is instanced by the 6 souls here in this room when there should be 600. And coming, if they really wanted to be free, then they would be looking at their old skin and saying, "How do I get this off, Babaji?" And like I went to Swami Sheshanandaji, and he told me no uncertain terms how you get it off. But since I wasn't a monk, then he was talking about the Jnana Marga and the Bhoga Marga. And he pretty much classified most of the Westerners, and even a lot of his Hindu people of the day, as Bhoga Margis. They were following the path of pleasure, and that it wasn't going to work. It was going to lead to the Third World War. And you can come to the retreat and we will connect those dots for you. The Roman civilization, we're just enacting it over again. So he was warning about that because he wanted to see, not because he was scared that the country would fall apart and die, what doesn't fall apart and die in this world in time. But he was more concerned with Vedanta finding its perch here to save more people before the death process happens. Namrityo or Nashanka, you have no death. go to death thinking you died, then you're going to bring that impression back in your next lifetime. That's called being on the ancestor loop. They all think they died, and then they get up to heaven, they forget their past life, and then their karma catches up with them, and they have to go back down and choose parents, and then after they get the parents, they forget that they chose them, and they blame them for everything, instead of blaming themselves, and then for their own choices, you know, and then they go through another lifetime of forgetfulness. So enlightenment is called remembrance. And you forget because as soon as you get here, they engage you in business, commerce, money. And that you don't have any time to think of where you came from. They just immediately plunge you into Maya, out of Maya, into Maya. See? You don't even have time to catch a breath. So, and most people don't catch a breath their whole life. Catching a breath is like this. That's one minor pranayama. That's not even the intermediate level of pranayama yet. So you have to sit and do that. But maybe 30 miles from here under a pine tree in Gaston, Oregon. I practiced that for 2 summers, 2 years that is. I couldn't go out in the winter to do it very easily. But you know, that's catching your breath. You become aware that you breathe, and then that's not enough. Most people stop there if they do pranayama. Okay, I'm healthy now, you see. But you just got the gross prana moving, you know. So now you feel kind of good, you see. But you have to get the subtle prana moving too, and that means this prana that's moving your thoughts are still stodgy. So then you go from that set of 5 pranas to connected to the inner set of 5 pranas, and this is the dynamics of these stages of yoga that the soul goes through in order to awaken, thoroughly awaken itself for all times, so that ignorance is gone forever, and you don't even remember what it was like anymore to be ignorant. It's just like you can't remember your kindergarten days. So you just forget ignorance completely. It's like it never existed because it never did exist. Na satya vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate satyaha, Krishna says in the Gita. The unreal never is. The real never ceases to be. The truth about both came to be known by the seers. Tattvadarshibhihi, he says. They came to know the tattvas. Then they came to know they weren't the tattvas. Then they came to know they projected the tattvas. See, it's kind of some souls who are fairly enlightened don't go the full distance to realize that all of nature came out of them. They'll just abandon nature and get free. But they don't make the best teachers for people who are stuck in nature. See? If teaching cello to students younger in my younger life, you see, if I had just studied cello from a book, then I wouldn't have been that great a teacher for them. But I had actually reached a certain degree of mastery of cello and become a professional and played in symphonies, and so then I knew the cello inside out, and I could be a good teacher for them. See? But if I had just read it in a book and say, "Oh yeah, I know cello," you see, and never laid my hands on it, it wouldn't have amounted to anything. So in the same way, beings who come to know that third phase I was talking about, of that not only are the tattvas there and I'm not them, but actually I projected them out of my own mind. That's a full realization, and then you can move up and down the amber stairs of birth and death at will, like Dalai Lama has many times, and Swami Vivekananda does every 700 to 1,000 years. Holy Mother said, he's like a wooden statue who sits in meditation for 700 years at a time. So we're to think probably his last reincarnation here was that long ago. A great Buddhist teacher actually appeared at that time, and people were sort of thinking that maybe Swamiji was that being. So when they come back here, then they do so in full consciousness of the tattvas. They know the unreal never is, the real never ceases to be, and they are that reality. And so sometimes we try and explain it sentient and insentient. The tattvas are not sentient, like moon shines by borrowed light kind of idea. But the soul is pure sentiency, so it needs to come to know itself as that, and then it can move amongst the objects of the senses without getting attached or afflicted by them, and that would be called the yoga marga. For those practicing the jnana marga, they just come and say, oh, it's unreal, I give it up, goodbye, I'm gone forever. Like Buddha said, his birthday was yesterday. So we celebrated it last night. So I have no hope for me for the world anymore. I'm gone and gone forever. But before I go, you should know one thing. You can call me anything you want, but you need to know that I'm awakened. Buddha. I'm the Buddha, Buddhi. I'm awakened intelligence. As they didn't necessarily go towards names for divine reality in Buddhism. We'll just call it awakened Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, a mass, a mass, an indeterminable mass of pure conscious awareness or non-dual intelligence. You strive for words. It's hard to find words for it, but that's the dharma that is qualified non-dualism. You have to come in at some place to it. And if you come in, someone was telling me the other day, if you come in just at a dualistic level, then is that going to be okay? And I said, well, if you're aware of Advaita before you come into Advaita, then it'll be okay, because you have something to measure it against. But it's going to be okay to find a dualistic path and follow it, but it's a slower way. And qualified non-dualism then is allowing you to jump to a kind of chase again, where the Dharma is going to rid you of ignorance early on, so you can maybe even wake up before you wake up. Sort of, like you may have also had a dream where you're sleeping in your bed and you wake up and you get up and you move about the room, but you realize that was a dream. You hadn't really woken up yet, and then you did really wake up on your bed and you're in your body. So it's sort of like a preconceived or state of awakening that these beings experience when they get these teachings of qualified non-dualism. Oh, I see, it's all coming back to me, And as it comes back to you, you're living it, and it's awakening. It's just like enjoying the trip. See, you get to participate in your own awakening rather than just, like Sri Ramakrishna said, striking a match in a dark room, and all of a sudden everything's illuminated. That's very rare that happens. So, Sri Ram says that in the Adhyatma Ramayana, the mind awakens in stages. Get your enlightenment by stages is how it usually happens. So some Kriti is asking the sun god, and the sun god's giving him these stages, and we looked at them. So coming to know that life's a dream will eventually put you into a state of awareness of non-duality, which it could be mated up with what we call deep sleep. There's nothing in deep sleep that is separate. It's all one. But consciousness isn't looking on as the witness to deep sleep yet until it does awaken. And so as we looked at that yesterday, we went through this teaching about revealed scriptures finding its way like footfalls out of the inner ethers or bardos or akashas or lokas into earth, and becoming an actual book that you could read off of and so forth. It's just 5 elements, mostly earth, a little water, some air, but that's how the 5 elements can support the Dharma. I mean, it could be a book about silly things or stupid things, or just abject suffering or fantasy. But it can also be used. The same with computers. It can also be used for something very profound. It's up to you to do that or not. And so we were looking at those slokas, particularly this one where, with a mind devoted to the teacher and to the path, and attending the company of the virtuous, that soul truthfully masters the entire body of knowledge, including all the secret doctrines. Secret doctrines, Swamiji said he wasn't really into the mystics as a class of people trying to say that there's some secret out there. He said the truth is just uncovered, it just shines forth. You can't hide a blazing fire in a cotton cloth. And some people are trying to do that with the truth. And because of the dullness of the people they're talking to, they actually pull the wool over their eyes. You can hide a blazing fire in a cotton cloth, or a wool cloth in that case. But for a soul who has any kind of intelligence at all, or who is awakened intelligence, they see right through the ruse. And like that pigeon who's, struggling to get free, they're not willing to take any masquerades or wooden nickels or any imitators. There's no usurpers to that throne of non-dual truth. And so they come straight to it and see it. Now it's just a matter of, can I measure up to it? And the measuring up would be that, those stages that you go through. You have to take them into account. And without judging your progress, which can be a matter of the ego getting a hold of it, but with a witness consciousness, say, I've come this far and this is how much further I have to go. And then you're in the process of awakening. And qualified non-duality, Vashishta Advaita we call it, is the quickest way to do that. There are other ways to do it, like the slow boat, the scenic route of Bhakti Yoga and so forth. But Jnana Yoga will accomplish it right away if you can give your full attention to it in one lifetime. You might even be able to awaken in 6 months if you understand it correctly. Because, why? Because all that knowledge is already within you. And when you find that out, then you think it's more possible to attain it. As you remember your younger life where you say, oh, there's too much to know, you said, how can anyone know anything? I think I'll just give it all up and just live, you see. But nobody told you, that's not quite the right attitude or perspective to take. All knowledge lies within you is like the second of some 8, 9, 10, or 11 stages of yoga in another system. Stages of knowledge, they're called. So all knowledge lies within you is like saying the kingdoms of heaven are within you. And Jesus told the fishermen and so forth that. So then all of a sudden you have a non-dual glimpse, or a qualified non-dual glimpse, and it makes it all more possible for you to awaken quicker, in a swifter fashion. And you're anticipating it now. Maybe expectations aren't good, but anticipation is a good thing, he used to say. And enthusiasm accompanies that. Not just a sort of cavalier attitude, or maybe some sort of complacency that goes along with it. Or maybe even, I think I'll just be satisfied to awaken in time. Say, no, I want to awaken when it's time. A young boy tells his mother, say, will you awaken me when I feel the calls of nature? And the mother says, you'll awaken when that happens yourself. And if you don't, you'll lay in your own wet bed. So every soul has that desire to awaken, and those who take it most seriously, and maybe as the goal of this lifetime, are not going to lose any chance to awaken as soon as they can. They'll sacrifice things for it, you see. Money, family, time, jobs. They'll sacrifice things for it because that they know once they have that money, time, family, and jobs will all be given to them. Ask and it shall be given. Love the Lord first, and then everything else will be added unto you. I mean, you have to remember just the simple dharmic sayings of the tradition you were raised in, so that you can successfully outstrip Maya, which is this all-pervasive thing that that 99% of humanity in every age is caught in, and only a few small percentage gets out. We used to reason that ourselves. We say, okay, now I've seen through it. Now I want to try and help others see through it. But what's the point? You know, everyone's already free. So there's different ways to go. They're just dreaming. They're bound. So okay, well then maybe I should help them awaken from the dream. Well, not really, because Mother has a time assigned for them when they're going to awaken from the dream. So I mean, this is the position you're in if you're a teacher, right? When you reason it out, there's no way to go. But you can't not stop. You can't, you know, not go about trying to awaken them, because there's the falling back to sleep syndrome. People do have an assigned time to awaken, like the child who wants his mother to awaken him, but they fall back to sleep. He falls back to sleep and wets his bed, you see, night after night, and lays in it. That's a lifetime of suffering. So then you do have to be one of these seers that comes down through the fivefold processes and gives all these teachings, and then stands back and waits for Mother to do her work, you see. Sort of like adding acid into the equation. Says, oh, it's going to burn through everything. You just wait and see. But some people have rock-like, granite-like ignorance in them. And others just have a few wispy tendrils of curtains of Maya. They could almost push them aside themselves. But, you know, it'd have to have some incentive. Because an opaque light, you know, is not that attracting. And a blazing light is too repelling. So it does have to happen with methods that are schooled and by a teacher who's adept. You give that medicine, Sri Ramakrishna said, the inferior doctor will prescribe it and never ask you if you took it, you see. But the mediocre doctor will call you once. Did you take that medicine? You didn't. Well, you better take it, click, and never see you again. But the superior medicine doctor goes to the door of the patient, knocks. You still didn't take that medicine? He wrestles you to the ground, sits on your chest, and forces it down your throat. So 3 kinds of doctors in spiritual life Sri Ramakrishna is talking about. And right now you're having the medicine forced down your throat. This is, you know, a superior teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Sheshananda, and so forth, passing it down through the tradition now of SRV. And a few of you have come forth here to, you know, with open mouths and ready to get a finger with a pill, like I used to give it to my dogs, you know. They shove the worm medicine down his throat, and they hated that. You have to be careful of the teeth and everything. Not to speak of the saliva and other things. So some people are there already in this lifetime. So what? You know, awakening? Do it. You know, help me. You know, I want this. Like you told me before class, you know, this is where I want to be, right here, not home with family and children and worries and the same mundane rounds of thing every day. And for a lifetime, you know, I want to be where the Dharma is being taught and where awakened souls are gathering with enthusiasm about the teachings. And, you know, that enthusiasm has wet blankets. Life has wet blankets to the higher things. We wish it had wet blankets for the lower things. If we could like take wet blankets and throw them over people's desire for insipid pleasures, say, okay, that's gone, you know. Here's your wet blanket, Bogamarga, you know, flop. So, you know, now see what path has left you when the path of enjoyment's not there anymore. Oh, you can transform yourself, or oh, you can get free in 6 months, you know. Gee, I didn't even notice that. But no. The wet blanket is always on the better things, you know, on the scriptures, on your guru. Let's cover them all up, you see, because they're spoiling my life. Right? They're actually giving you an eternal life and giving you an option for an eternal life. And you need to choose it now and take it, run with the ball. You know what happens if somebody throws you the ball in the field and you just stand there. You know, it's pig pile time, you see, like your children. 6 guys hit you as hard as they can and lay on top of you until the referee saves your ass. So, you know, in the meantime, you have to run with the ball, you see. So you've gotten the ball of Dharma, then you take it and do something with it. And that's called awakening yourself, because the teacher can only go so far. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, even God can do nothing for the worldly soul. God's helpless to try and awaken the worldly soul. They just turn away from that, and they won't listen. So they get the world, they get bhogamarga, and you know what happens when you get enjoyment. You get an equal amount of suffering. And it doesn't show up that way all the time, so you get fooled. Oh, I'm really having a lot of suffering. I'm really having a lot of enjoyment these past 3 years. But meanwhile, your suffering's mounting up behind it, and that an equal amount of that, you're going to get the full modicum of suffering that equals whatever enjoyment you had. But it may come in increments, or it may come all at once, whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, you can't fool Maya. It's a balance. Maya is not just this horrible thing we have to run away from and watch out for. It's also the skin of the mango. Nobody eats the skin, but we need the skin until the mango gets ripe. So Maya is necessary for the soul for a certain amount of time. It protects in a way. But then when the mango gets ripe, you don't want it to rot inside the skin. So you peel the skin and eat the mango and get nourished, but nobody eats the skin. I know people in Hawaii who eat too much mango, and even just eating the flesh will give you a rash if you're not careful. But the skin, of course, will make you sick. So there are teachings about Maya that, like Swamiji's teaching, it's a statement of fact, Maya. It's not illusion. People were, before Swamiji came here, people who were interested in Indian philosophy, like the Theosophical Society, and people that were on the scene there kind of waiting, because they saw big tent revivals happening in Christianity, and then they called, occult seances happening to contact your dead ancestors in the parlors, where people were fooling each other. And so they saw these two avenues going on in the West, but then they also saw that there's these wisdom traditions starting to come in the 1890s towards America. You look back and see and read about that. And of course, Swamiji was at the head of that wave, and was bringing the Vedanta, and particularly Advaita Vedanta, for those who could understand it. And so giving that out, would be the intellectual's interest. You had an intellectual life back then, and today it's not there, not in any deep way. And so the covering power is there in Maya. You have to be very careful of that. The scum on top of the lake. Sri Ramakrishna was there at the lake, green scum everywhere. His young charge was there with him. Watch this, and he spread the green scum, and then look at yourself. So they looked in and saw in the clear water, and then this green scum came dancing back, and he said, "That's just like Maya there. If you take a little effort, you can see yourself. But if you just sit there complacent and weak, and you're not doing anything, then you're just looking at green scum." Welcome to the neighborhood of Mr. Pond Scum. You never get out of it, you see. So, but even when you do take the effort and spread Maya away, and you see a glimpse, that's called getting a glimpse of Brahman. But if you're not careful, this will come dancing back and veil it. So now you doubt again that it even existed, or the psychologists are telling you it was a figment of your imagination, or your parents were saying, don't think about that. Don't think about death, when you should be meditating on your death, because it never really happened. You see, it's not a matter of morbidity. Swamiji said in our country, we were told to meditate on death, like give up right now and die. Just stop breathing. Give up your senses. You do it every night in sleep, you die. You're practicing for death every time you go to sleep, really. And when you're seeking samadhi, that practice is upon you. So this is the crucial practice that will disprove my ego. Because somewhere along the way, right about there, ego, I became a separate self. See? I became a separate self. I made myself into a separate I. And that was a big mistake. And it was called Mulavidya, root ignorance. There's ignorance down here that's grown exponentially around every little thing we have, the varieties of things that distract us, like walking dogs out here in Portland. Things that distract us and take us away from things we should be doing. But then there's also Mulavidya, which is your first move away from Brahman. You see, was that really wise? Well, then you find a teacher, you see, and that teacher tells you, well, you never really moved away from Brahman. You can assume an ego, because you need that to get into the world and do your mission and so forth. That's called a ripe ego. So here I'll show you how to develop an ego and keep it ripe, and give it up, in meditation every day. See? Whatever happened to me during the day, I got offended by, or I got overjoyed with, because of someone insulted me or someone gave me money or whatever. So those things, at the end of the day, you dissolve them. They never happen to you because they happen to the ego. They didn't happen to the Atman. What does the Atman need with money? See? Or what does the Atman suffer from insult? So you re-school yourself every day in that by your meditation. Ignorance is unreal, so how can it cause you any real doubt? The scriptures. So all the doubt you experience is coming from an unreal source. So you're two steps behind Maya. You come one step behind Maya when you realize that there is ignorance and I can get rid of it. But people suffer by getting into ignorance, and then they think it's real, and then they have doubt about it. And that's 2 steps behind Maya. And it's very unlikely they'll find their way out at that point. Unless grace, as it were, comes to them in the form of a teacher or their own good karmas come and save them. I've had many people tell me, you gave me the mantra, Babaji, and I never used it. Then my life started falling apart, so I started using it. And I realized that I would have never survived if I hadn't have had the mantra. So for most people nowadays, that's 1 or 2 steps behind the mantra. They don't realize its power in these little words. It's this little formula that somebody's meditated on for hundreds of years, impregnated with power. Right from the Trinity, from the cosmic mind, those words come. Mother gives it to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. See? So that's why we like to sing about it. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwara, Gurur Eva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So the Guru, Tattva, the true teacher, who is one and indivisible, is Lord Brahma, is Lord Vishnu, and is Lord Shiva, the Trinity. And that's the first evolute, or the first origin out of Samkhya, would be the Mahat, cosmic mind. First thing that comes about. You could call it the word, too, if you want, or Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg. Everything happens inside of that ego assumption of 3 great beings. They took on a cosmic ego, and they'll be there for the whole cycle. They can't get enlightened, nor can they fall away from Brahman. They're too close to it. But they can't ever unite with Brahman, you see, because they have this 4,320,000,000 years service to do to souls that are filtering through samsara. That's what it means when it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So those are 3 things. So X out the first and third, the Word was with God. That's the Trinity. They're with God, but they're not God yet. They've taken on an ego. They've separated out. Brahman is here, we're here. And then the rest of the world's all trickled down in 5s from there. It's one of the most clear systems, no matter how you might want to explain it or go to other systems that aren't maybe quite so long-lived and immutable, because this has been there in the Hindu scriptures from time out of mind, and it keeps coming back. And that actually segues me into where we left off yesterday, is that we had some secrets of the scriptures. Again, the word secret is a kind of a tongue-in-cheek word there, because they're not secrets just like, oh, I'll never know that because nobody's telling me it. You know, these are obvious secrets. It's like hiding in plain sight. You know, that's a nice expression. Oh, it was hiding in plain sight. Like you looked everywhere from it, you know, for that ring, but you found it on your finger, you know. Or you looked everywhere for that towel after your shower, but it was over your own shoulder, you know. There are stories like that in Ramayana and Mahabharata and so forth, where you're looking everywhere for that thing. It's like that story that Swami Sarvapriyananda tells on the YouTube now, where there was this merchant, and he was going over the border with all this mule trains of stuff, you know. And the police knew that he was, you know, he was really a thief, you know. And so they'd search his mule train, mule to mule, looking for this stolen goods that he was, you know, taking across the border. Never found a thing. For years this went on. So finally the police retired, and he retired from being a thief or a merchant. And they met in this grog house one night, you see, near the border, and the police said, well, now that we're not officials, we can't put you in jail anymore. Tell us, did you ever really, you know, pilfer things and take them over the border? And if you did, would you tell us? Because we're dying to know. He says, what were you, what's the word?
Smuggling.
Huh?
Smuggling?
Yeah, smuggling. What were you smuggling all this time that we couldn't find? And he said, well, then I'll tell you, it was mules. So it's like hiding in plain sight. You know, it's all a teaching about smuggling Brahman. You know, if you look it up on the website, you'll see that. And you'll see Swami Sarvapriyananda, who's a great Swami teaching very Westerners nowadays from the Ramakrishna order. It's called Smuggling Brahmins. You can hear him tell the full story, but it's very apropos, and you know, it's funny, and it's ironic and all that. But the real point of it is that, you know, we're all smuggling Brahman everywhere. You know, across the borders of our cosmic principles, we're going for different reasons, for different desires. But it's all really just to realize Brahman, because everything is Brahman. But that's how veiled it is by Maya. And then the veiling can turn into distortion. After the thing's imperfections can begin to seem real, like ignorance turning into doubt, and doubt turning into fear. And you know, it's got this progression of Maya that goes on inside of you. So, like I said, we were looking at the secrets of the scriptures, and we'll finish this up in accordance with Sloka 15, for those of you who are following the text. We had looked at the fact that there were three great sources, Vidya Shastra, Guru Anushasan, and Aparakshanubhuti. You have a guru, you have the scriptures, and you have your own direct experience. So those are called the three great sources. You should, you know, imbibe those for yourself. And then we saw that there were different ways of interpreting the scriptures. That you can interpret them as separate doctrines. Oh, you know, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Muslim. You can, separate doctrines, and you can belong to one of them. And then you can interpret your own scripture as being the book. So this is the book, right? And there's no other book than this. And it's got a conclusion, as if scriptures can ever stop. Or people don't need new interpretations of them from age to age, you know, but they're not thinking that deeply. So then people think a little deeper, and they think, well, maybe I'll reconcile the religions. And so they think that's a great thing, you know, and oh, now aren't we so, isn't that big of us, you know, that we've actually admitted that there are other religions here, you know, like the Christians. They'll admit there's other religions somewhere in one of their doctrines. I read it recently. And the only other religion there is Judaism, basically. And then the little bit of mention about Muslims. But right there in their doctrine they'll say, oh, you know, the indigenous tribes, the Aryan Indians and so forth, those aren't religions. So they're not accounting for the other half of the world or more. They're just a little bit afraid of Judaism, and they're very afraid of Muslim. So that's not a real reconciliation. It's silly. It's not reconciliation. It's just silly thinking. So the way the avatars see it is that everything is already one. It's already a natural synthesis. It's like you came here and you were given a jewel, and all the facets had a different symbol for each religion on it. That's how Swami Chaitananda has put together the beautiful. It's on one of our nectar covers. Our new nectar is out, by the way, so you're welcome to take a copy. But there's a diamond there, and there's facets, and in each facet there's a cross and an Om sign and a candelabra, and there's various things you see there. So it's really all naturally one. It's just depending on which one if you're looking at it from a witness standpoint. So that's a secret of the scriptures to India, that there are ways of reconciling, and then there are ways of separation. But there's also a way of looking at it as a natural synthesis, and that's the best exemplar of that we have in common modern times is Sri Ramakrishna, who actually went about to prove that, not on purpose, but because he loved God so much, he looked into all the religions and found them all to have the same essence. Had a vision of Muhammad, had a vision of Jesus, and stopped his own religious practices to have them. He didn't mix them. Some people think, he can get into 4 or 5 of them and dig a lot of separate wells, but you never strike water that way. So you have to put everything aside and dig one deep well. So, I found it with that. Now I can go to the other one, dig another deep well, and find out that the same essence that is in Christianity is in a Muslim religion too. Same essence. Allah, Almighty Father, Brahman, different names, but same essence. Like my teacher used to say, that great mountain that everyone wants to climb. We call it Gauri Shankar in India, but you call it Mount Everest in America, but it's the same mountain. So people have different names for the same reality, but they don't know that. They don't think that when they use the names. So that's the secret of the scriptures that you should know about. Otherwise you're going to, pan some of the scriptures. Like we shouldn't be panning the Bible simply because it's reached the hands of King James and so forth, and really gotten, less powerful than Christ's original Aramaic and Greek. We know this, we've looked into it. But you can still find a lot of powerful teachings in Jesus' sayings that haven't been tampered with. It's like in the Gita, you can tamper with Krishna's teachings. A few organizations have, I think, like trying to take the word Brahman out of the Gita just because you like Krishna so much. You see. So there's some fight between the Vaishnavas and the Advaitas about that. That's just petty. You should be big, noble, and say, well, I see this perspective. I can go to that. I go into deep sleep every night and I'm formless, so why can't I believe in formlessness? Why can't I believe that Krishna is formless? Why does it have to be a form? See, this is one of the problems of the Westerners, is when they go towards Advaita, they cling to matter. They can even say, I'm not the body. They still cling to matter. They can even say, I'm going to meditate away the ego. They still cling to matter. It's like routed so deep in their thinking. They can't give it up. And so what's behind that is this deep fear of being disembodied. So you have to meditate that away and be disembodied like Brahman is, like Mahavishnu is, like Paramashiva is. There's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but there's also Mahavishnu. There's also Paramashiva. Each of those traditions say, well, there's an ultimate formless side to this great soul. So be big enough to admit that. Maybe even court it. You want to get rid of fear of death, then shouldn't you be disembodied? And then when you're disembodied, shouldn't you say, well, guess what? I don't have a body anymore, but here I am. This is what happens to you in birth and death. You just forget it. If you could come back with the memory of your last lifetime, you say, I died in my last lifetime. But actually I really didn't, did I? Because here I am. So if you just develop even memory of one lifetime, you could just prove death to yourself. And then you wouldn't be operating under its premise anymore, and the fear that comes from it and all that. You'd be living in eternal life, which is what Jesus was trying to tell them. You need an eternal life. And until you get it, I can't make you fishers of men. You can't awaken other people if you still believe that you're born and you die. I mean, one man wanted to follow Jesus. Oh, I want to follow you, Lord, and I'm coming, but I have to bury my father. He just died. Let the dead bury their dead. You come with me right now. They don't have any respect for personalities and egos and people who die and so forth. They know that it's your moment. See, you've seen the light, and if you don't take that moment, Maya's going to cover it up, like funeral rites. And he gets into funeral rites for his father. It takes days. He can't go see Jesus. Then just as he's going, the daughter decides to get married. Now it's wedding rites, you see, rituals. He gets sucked into Maya again, just as sure as. So you come with me right now. See? I mean, that's what our founder Lex Hixon used to do to some of us. He'd come, going around society, and he was free. And he'd just say, he'd go into a room with me and say, that one's on fire, that one's on fire. He'd go talk to those people and wouldn't talk necessarily to the rest. So he would there to espy certain souls who had those signs of awakening and call them out, while the getting's good. So you have to, maybe this lifetime is your wake-up call. But I wouldn't say that's true for most people. In their lifetime, they have 1 year or 1 month or maybe even 1 day that they get that wake-up call. And everything closes back up. Like the lotus that can't bear the clouds. It opens, Sri Ramakrishna said, when the sun's out. You see. But clouds are coming. So the cloud goes in front of the sun and it can't bear that, so it closes. So he used to say, even ordinary people have samadhi. I mean, we were talking about it the other day. If you go into deep sleep, it's a kind of samadhi. You can even have a kind of samadhi with objects, you see. Oh, I love my iPad, you see. And look how much wisdom it has. It's a great friend, you see. So you can, if you have non-attachment and so forth, then you can have samadhi of objects. But it can't be if your attachment to external objects is intensified by pride, conceit, intolerance, greed, and delusion. That sounds like America to me. That sounds like Americans today, most of them, and government and politics. Their attachment to objects has been intensified by these pride, conceit, intolerance, greed, and delusion. But the verse before says, the awakened soul resorts to scholars well known for their interpretations of scriptures, for their good conduct, for their fixed attention, and for their contemplation on God, and for their dharmic activities. 2 slokas earlier. So, Sun God is saying, here it is, Samkriti, that's them and that's them. We hate to say, separate them from us, but that's for people who have some sort of political stick up their rear end. For the awakened souls, we have to make that wheat from chaff distinction. That's not called elitism. That's called qualification. You qualify yourself, and you give up the world, and you give up the worldly people, because you need to awaken yourself. Then, if you're a Buddha and you're awakened, you can go back to King Sakya, your father, and your stepmother, and you can give them the Buddha. The new dispensation of the age, which Buddhism was at that time, in India, not in Japan, China, and Tibet, in India. So these are secrets of the scriptures. You put this all together in your mind when you contemplate them over years. You go to the foremost scholars and you learn from them. You don't go and intensify your attachment to Western materialism and get all arrogant and conceited and say my country is better than yours and my religion's better than yours. People used to say to Swamiji when he's here, well, Christianity is so much better than Hinduism. Look at your country's in ruins and we're opulent. And Swamiji said, well, that's precisely why we are a religion and Christianity isn't today, because we've suffered. You haven't. You're living on this in this bubble, Roman Grecian bubble. I mean, look at the White House. It's just Greek architecture. So we borrowed from Rome and Greece. And what were Rome and Greece about? Create an opulent society based on domination over others. That's Rome and Greece. And thankfully, they had a few scholars like Aristotle, and that were in that opulent society, were thinking deeper and say, well, Maya's about to come. You see, the devil's on our trail. We better waken up and look beyond this cradle to the grave philosophy that we're in, which is only going to last a few hundred years at best. So they were far-sighted. And the part of their society got developed, but where is that in America? Where are our great philosophers? The ones who calling themselves greats, are under the influence of the ego, spiritual ego. Because they're not, like I said, they're attached to matter, even though they're talking about spiritual things. You have to follow what you preach. If this tells you to give up the world, you give it up, then you teach. You can't cling to it and teach at the same time. You can walk a line between it, like the yoga mark, you see, because you're not a monk, so you're not going to give up the world externally and internally. You're just going to give it up internally. If you're a householder, you give it up in here. Oh, I see. Wife, children, they're all passing. Everything's passing. Everything's changing. I shouldn't grasp onto it whatsoever. What to speak of intensifying the grasping with arrogance and pride, and that's going to really put me behind the 8 ball. So the interpretation of the scriptures and these secrets are not just old, moldy books and old souls that are long dead and don't have any efficacy anymore for today's day and age. This is the current dharma shining as truth in this eternal moment that we live in. Since it's not old or ancient, it's eternal. And we're not elitists, we're qualified souls. Because we're availing ourselves of the truth as it appears to us in this age. And we have the verification of Swami Vivekananda in that matter, and Sri Ramakrishna, and Holy Mother. So we're not out on a limb. See, we're not walking the plank. You're talking about the people who are taking the world as their oyster. They're walking the plank. We've saved ourselves from that mess, and we want to make sure we stay safe. Let's look at the final of these, so we make headway through these slokas. We looked at the top 3 of these so-called secrets. Because we ended that you should know that there's higher truth and lower truth. Paravidya, aparavidya. In the West, it's all aparavidya. See, like theology on one side and science on the other. Rock and a hard place. So the Supreme Court justices, some decades ago, we side with science. So decree, evolution is true, religion isn't. So all the theologians were like left out in the lurch in America. Churches stopped having people come, see. And so nobody knew, as Swamiji said later, is that both theology and science are aparavidya. You're arguing about something that just doesn't need to be argued about because you haven't seen the higher truth yet. You're arguing about 2 things that belong to the realm of lower truth, theology and science. You haven't heard about Advaita yet, see, non-duality, and know that Christ was a free-moving sannyasin who was an Advaitist. I and my Father are one, and be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven. What about that, you see? So one of the secrets of the scriptures is that you should know that there's higher knowledge and lower knowledge, and we're not seeing the higher knowledge. I think one of the things that would acquaint you with higher knowledge would be the word unmanifested prakriti, because just like it seems to be one nature with 5 elements and trees and lakes and oceans and rivers and forests and everything, and we're looking at that saying, oh, matter, 5 elements, let's explore that, let's split the atom and so forth, without ever knowing that all of those things came from seeds. Unmanifested prakriti And what you're seeing out here is like 5%, and the other 95% of nature is hidden. And where is it hidden? In you. See? The seeds are in you. Where are they in me? In my deep sleep state. You know, I mean, that's all the gateways to higher knowledge. And you've never even entertained it. You've tripped up. You know, it's like Shomakas just said, there's this great mansion with a wide open door. And you're trying to get through the doorway, but there's all these tree stumps. See? And you're tripping over them. You can't get around them. They're so huge. So you're putting up all these barriers to finding higher knowledge. Imagine a quantum physicist in possession of higher knowledge, what he might do, you see, with the power of an atom, or what he might not do with the power of an atom might be better said. Oh, I don't think I'll mess with that, you see. There are atoms of my intelligence that are much more intriguing to split. And that will open up bliss and insight instead of destruction of people. I should be meditating like that, you see. Seeing through the ego, even going beyond the cosmic ego and having enlightenment. Not just awakening, but going the full distance. So that's a very powerful teaching. I have a whole chart on that, which I could take up. But we're looking at this in accordance with sloka 14 and 15 of the Akshi Upanishad. Akshi again means to clearly see. Akshatam. It's like you put on the Shiva Lingam last night, we're putting some chandanam, some paste, and a grain of rice, and say Akshatam. So it's that eye, you know, of awakening, spiritual awakening. All right, in black, you see there the 4 views on the origin of Scripture. So we know that there's 3 ways of interpreting the Scripture now, and that's a secret. And we know that Scriptures are one of the 3 great sources. That's a secret for most people. Now we're finding out that there are 4 views of how the Scriptures began. And a parashe would be the first, and most preferably. It's of divine origin, so it doesn't begin. That's called non-origination. It's something that's a part of the higher wisdom. You would never think that things don't really begin and end, because you believe in birth and death, right? Since you are born and died, you think everything else is being born and dying too. Creation, preservation, destruction is in a loop. But creation, preservation, destruction is just a tempest in a teapot, you know, going around, and there's a hand holding it, and there's an observer to it. And you need to align yourself with the observer to see that this is the case. Witness consciousness. So when you do, you'll find out that all these scriptures that I listed here on the shelf of my study case at home, that I went through since I was 20, and when I read and studied, and then I began to share it with others, all of those are originless. You don't say that, you know, well, Patanjali had a birth back in 140 AD, and therefore he created the 8-limbed yoga for us, you see, that far back. But you don't know that he's had births since then, and he had births before that. So you can never say that the 8-limbed yoga got created. It got reinterpreted from age to age. Pull it out of the cosmic mind. And that's the next one. It's Ishvariya. Originates from Ishvara. So it has to have a container somewhere. So, you know, you say probably Ishvara equates in this chart with the Mahat. Although in many systems Ishvara is greater than the Mahat. It's this father of yogas, speaking of the Yoga Sutras, said Ishvara is a special soul, a unique, singular soul, who has all these divine qualities in it. So it's about the only mention of God that Father of Yoga put in the sutras. You don't find Buddha, Patanjali, and others talking about God. That it muddies the waters for people. In this age, for sure. Because now God's not popular. Doesn't even exist for most people. Or, you know, it's just a blind faith kind of thing. You're not loving it and trying to find it, are you? You're just like going to church and saying, "Oh, we bow and scrape before you." You see, as if you're some fellow up in the cloud, but no connection inside to the eternal. So they won't mention that. Since the eternal can't be talked about, they won't talk about it. They'll point to it with dharma, and then you have to make the moves on it, see, and draw your conclusions based on your own experience, and that takes you back to aparokshanubhuti, one of the great, you have to get your own experience around it. So put all these together, you have the great secret of how to move through the Jnana-marga path, how to conduct yourself in the atmosphere of the scriptures, how to qualify yourself in the comprehension of the scriptures, and how to use them as tools, you see, like the great souls do. So Patanjali would come back every lifetime with the 8 limbs in him. And he'd say, oh, in this age, though, the seer has become attached to the seen, so I better pen it out for them. Before it was all recited from me to my child, right? And never written down. This age has gotten dense. I better pen it out for them. Okay, first 5 yamas, 5 niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, 8 limbs. Now I'm going to fill those out for you. And this is a practice you can do now. Whereas yoga is not a practice. It's a state of being. One. Union. Yoga. But yoga as practice needs to be given to you now in this age, Kali Yuga. So here it is. No, this is my point. Ishvarya and Aparashaya are no origin, really, as far as any beginning, middle, or end to the scriptures. They're eternal. The truth is eternal. And this is the best way to express the truth. But it has to have a storehouse. And so the best place would be the mind of Ishvara. Sacrosanct mind, pure mind, unobstructed mind, Buddha mind. And then it comes down from there to Archa. It originates from the seers. Well, there's no real problem with that, except the word originate. Because the seers aren't going to say, this is mine. Not the Indian seers. In fact, when Patanjali came out with the new version, that new version of the 8 limbs, he started it out with a sloka about how this is not mine. I learned all this from my teachers before, and so forth. He actually, was that a disclaimer? A scriptural, spiritual disclaimer you put on everything in India? Because if you don't, it's a rule, you don't call it mine, because you're just going right to the ego, and the ego gets a hold of that. And other people get a hold of it. You may have an ego and it doesn't hurt you, but other people see your ego and they want to praise it. That's what happened to Christianity over 2,000 years. And that's what happened to Hinduism many times. Personality worship. The Guru is not a personality, it's a principle. And so you've got to keep that clear. See? And it's in you. That principle is in you. You are Brahman. So you're connecting it, the 3 steps again. Dualism, qualified non-dualism, non-dualism. You don't want to leave those 3 separate or at odds with each other. So originate from the seers? Well, in a way, yes. But how about parashaya, which is of course the opposite of aparashaya? It originates from the human intellect. Human intellect is frail, it's ever-changing, it's subject to the ego. I don't buy that one. But a human intellect that's awakened, like a buddhi, like the Buddha, can store the scriptures and share them with you without tainting them, you see. It's like walking out with a plate full of food for people and going, as you're putting your tongue on it, okay, I give it to you now, see. Tainted food, right? So if you have a great soul, he'll give you the scriptures untainted. He won't have touched them with the tongue of his own ignorance or his own speculation or his own interpretation. He wants it from the source. And he'll take pains to make sure that it's from the source and comes to you unsullied. That's the true unsullied army, if you know what I mean. All right, the other 3 is a quick study and we can end for our break. Those are the 3 proofs of truth and the 3 potent practices in the lower corners. They're the same thing. They were just given in a different age. So one's called Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, and that's the chart we'll go to after the break. I'll show you the new chart about Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. It means that you must listen to an authority like these great souls, and then you must contemplate what you hear, and then you must realize it. This is coming full circle, whereas some people hear and go away. See, oh, I heard that, or I read the Gita once in my life. No, not enough. And the same thing happens over here, only it's called Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava. Means hearing the truth, reasoning about it, and experiencing it for yourself. So those are really pretty much the same thing, but in different ages. You won't get confused about them now that I've showed you both and how they're really the same thing. You could make a case for them having a little bit different dynamics, like over here you contemplate it, but here you're reasoning about it. Those really should be seen as, two things in one. You reason about it from your intellect, but you contemplate it from your meditation. See? So there are levels in which you will go somewhere and sit under a tree like Buddha did or Christ did and just think about it. You're not just like saying, oh, I think I'm going to go to God now. They're thinking of all of humanity. Jesus is sitting there under the tree thinking of the Romans killing people. And he's thinking of the Pharisees who are desecrating the Jewish religion at the time, you see, many of them. So he's not just thinking, oh, I want to go to the Almighty Father. That'll happen as he gets his meditation deepens. But in the meantime, he's thinking about the present time, his own apostles, and so forth. Oh, God bless them, protect them. May they carry on the teachings and so forth. So this is all a part of that process, and so the contemplation goes deeper. But at first you're going to have to reason about it. Like Swamiji, that came to the West. They put him up in these, turn of the century mansions with people, who are, smoking a pipe and dutiful wives and everything, and some of them recognize Swamiji as a great soul. So he's in there, they get up one morning, he's in the parlor pacing. Gee, he said that he was not restless. I thought he was just perfectly balanced. And so Swamiji, they ask him about it. He says, oh, well, I'm working out the whole future of humanity here. Don't bother me, So his restlessness was a deep reasoning about how to get around the barriers that the Westerners were in. There's nice people there in these parlors, in these houses. And then there's the riffraff, too, of Chicago around him. But basically he's thinking, God save them all, but save me from them, he used to say. So, as God saves me, in a sense, as I go back to my own Atman, I want to take some of these souls with me, like Sister Nivedita, Josephine MacLeod, Goodwin, and these Americans and English people who got behind him and really saw him for what he was, and were totally dedicated to him the rest of their life. This Indian man, a Swami, whoever heard of a Swami at that time? They couldn't even spell the name right in the newspaper. See? The Hindu monk, Hindoo, because whoever knew what a Hindu was, The English did, because they went to India and took all their goods. But some of the English, didn't go with that, and, sided with Gandhi later and so forth. But Vivekananda was on the scene there, and in the West, in Europe, and America both. And we'll talk a little bit about the ramifications of that at the retreat this weekend. On my Guru's teachings, I'm calling it how the West was when Swamiji was there, and what he saw, and how he was pacing all the time, whether he was pacing physically or pacing in his mind. He was trying to work out these problems in the short time that he had, 39 years. Like Shankara, 32 years, amongst us. But 1,300, 1,200 years earlier. I mean, you could really draw a correlation between Shankara and Swamiji as being, the same soul. But anyway, this kind of pacing wasn't a restlessness. It was a working out, and then a going forth to try and work it out in people. And the best tool to work it out with was the Vedanta and yoga, as a transformation of mind. And this was going to uplift them the Jnana Marga was really big on his mind. He named himself discrimination, viveka. So he knew that wheat from the chaff wasn't just a teaching that Jesus 2,000 years ago needed to be brought back. You need to get the non-essential aside, and Christ said, "Get thee behind me," because those are the real devil. There's no real devil. The real devil is in the details, as they say. Like, I'm going to meditate. Oh no, I have to walk the dog or something. All these distractions are there, and you never get around to the meditation. That's the essential thing to do. So let's read the final quote so that we can go to this new chart when we come back after the break. Final quote here by Lord Vashishta, who is one of the 10 mind-born sons of Lord Brahma in that age, says, Atmagyan scriptures treat self-knowledge and lead to divine wisdom. And you're talking about Paravidya there. But ordinary shastras treat terrestrial knowledge and lead to further bondage. So if you have a scripture that's a mixture of sugar and sand, you must be an ant and take the sugar and leave the sand, Sri Ramakrishna said. So you go to these scriptures that have been interpolated and text tortured. Swamiji used to use those words. And of course, we know Bible and Quran and even, the Gita nowadays, according to get into some people's hands, they get text tortured. So you have to be very careful about that. And if the measure is, if it talks about terrestrial matters, then pan it. You're not there to read more about who owned what tent peg and what tent and what family 500 years ago, which is in the Old Testament, pages and pages of it. I've tried to look for wisdom teachings in the Old Testament. It took me a long time to get through the terrestrial knowledge. But the revealed scriptures over here, Ashtavakra Samhita, Avaduta Gita, Adhyatma Ramayana, Gaudapadaskarika, Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, 108 Upanishads, they don't beat around the bush. You open the first page and it's about you and God. And if you do have any sense of separation from that God, whatever you call it, here's how to get rid of that sense of separation. Because it's ignorance that's unreal that's causing you doubt. But you're not satisfied enough just to say this. Lord Vashishta says between the distinction between Atmagyan scriptures and terrestrial scriptures, he says, but even the Atmagyan scriptures will be non-productive if the imp of lower mind attached to conventional and secular knowledge is not exercised thoroughly. So you can have, like we were saying yesterday, an impure mind, and you can intensify that, and you're intensifying the impurities. At the same time, you're intensifying the good things you're trying to seek. So you must start out, do a certain amount of basic purification, and then intensify. You don't just jump from one lower stage to a higher stage and hope for the best. So it's kind of funny, they're exorcised. You see, I made a Freudian script, I said exercise. What you should be exercising is your sadhana. What you should be exorcising is this ignorance in your head. So let's pause here then for a break. Thank you.